You're not.
You can see your left move.
You could not. All right. Now can you hear me? All right. There. So, let's get that. There we go. I haven't broken it yet, Jose. Okay. Tonight, Diane is going to talk about one of her homes. She's a woman who's kind of lived in various parts of the U.S. and has spent 3 hurricane seasons. It's a really bizarre way, in my opinion, to gauge time, but you know, that's what happens when you live or travel in the Caribbean. She has lived in Trinidad, traveled, played. She loves it. So she's going to talk about the magic of Trinidad. Help me welcome Diane Tetrault.
Hey, y'all. Can you tell I'm from the South?
The south of Trinidad.
Yes. If I can hear me, I guess y'all can hear me. I want to apologize first about not having many pictures when I decided to go on this Odyssey adventure. I got rid of everything I owned for the 3rd time in my life. And so I was bound and determined nothing was going into storage. So all my pictures, is this making funny? Is that better or worse? Oh, purple people eater. I did not have to start now. Can you hear me now? That sounds better. Better?
Like it?
Yeah. But anyway, I took all the pictures of all of the last few years off of my computer and off of my phone, never thinking I would need to have any of those pictures again. And I would like to have had some, but I have 1 or 2, so please bear with me with very few pictures. My talk tonight is supposed to be about Trinidad, and it will be, I promise. But I wanted to let you know a little bit about my prior cruising life and how I became a cruiser and how I got to Trinidad. My boating and traveling story actually began in North Texas when my husband and I had a little 23-foot ski and scuba diving boat. We went all over the Texas lakes and enjoyed the muddy lakes of scuba diving. And after a while we decided that we were needing a bigger boat, but we didn't know exactly what kind. So we went to the Virgin Islands, deciding that a houseboat would be nice. You never know. But we saw sailboats cutting through the water and looking so peaceful at sunset that we thought, that looks like a pretty good idea. So we went back to Dallas and started looking for a new sailboat. I only had 2 requirements, one of which it wouldn't turn over. Because I didn't like the way boats leaned over and went through the water. I wanted them to sit up straight. Little did I know. And it had to have a bathroom. So my husband Don went out and looking for a boat. And he had a little bit of a challenge because he wanted a boat he could stand up in. And he was only 6'2.5". So between the 3 requirements, we actually found a Catalina 30-foot long, little Catalina, and it was the perfect boat. Our salesman came and he brought it out to the marina, and our boat was on a lake right in between Oklahoma and Texas. And it was called Lake Texoma. What a surprise. And so we got our first sailboat, and the yacht broker took us out, and he said, "How long have y'all been sailing?" And we said, "This is the first time we've ever been on a sailboat." Did not have a clue. So we had our first lesson, And then we decided that, boy, the hardest part of this whole thing is going to be getting this huge boat. 23 to 30 was huge. Getting it in and out of the slip without banging into anybody else's boat. And it turned out that was pretty easy. The hard part was learning how to tack. And if you've ever been on a sailboat, you know that it's pretty easy. You're going straight. You want to turn this way, you just adjust a few things. If you want to turn this way, you adjust a few things. But if you want to turn and go the other direction, it's a whole lot harder. We made so many 360-degree tacks. Thank goodness the lake was big enough that nobody saw us. But learn to sail we actually did. And we really, really enjoyed it. And so for 15 years, we would go in and out all the little coves around Lake Texoma. And we did it almost every weekend, because Dallas didn't get cold except in January and February, so we could spend a lot of time on the boat. And after 15 years or so, then we'd be out on the lake and watching the sun go down, or being out in the middle of the lake with no wind and drinking an ice cold beer. We'd say, what are we going to do when we grow up? Well, we were in our 50s by this time. And so we're looking at retirement. We don't have any kids. We don't have any pets. So there's lots of options. So what we finally did was we said, why don't we go cruising? Well, I don't know. That's an option. But we didn't know whether we were going to like it or not. So that meant we had to start cruising and start looking at boats and going different places. We went to the Chesapeake. We went to the Bahamas. We went to Florida. We went to the Virgin Islands. We even went to the coast of Texas and decided, yea, verily, we really did like being on boats, and the thought of going cruising wherever would be exciting and something we wanted to go do. So after we had decided that we wanted to do this, now it was time to go figure out what kind of boat we wanted and what decisions we needed to make. And those were a lot more decisions than we had been thinking about the prior 10 years, because we were just hanging out. But in late, let's see, I guess it was 1998, this is the only boat that picture of the boat that I have. And Don retired, so that after we decided this was the company that we wanted to buy the boat from, we made a contract, and they said, okay, it'll be ready in a year. So we went, well, okay, I guess we'll start waiting for that. So he retired, started making the decisions on all the different things that we needed to have on the boat, and all the different things that we needed to go do before we could take off and go cruising and begin our life on our very own Cloud 9. So that's my girl. And after they finally got her built, we sailed her from Bradenton, Florida, back across the Gulf of Mexico, and just happened to remember this little thought. Remember one day crossing the Gulf of Mexico with another couple on the boat, and I stood on the bow of the boat and said, I wonder how many oil rigs are out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. And if you've never been to the Gulf of Mexico, I can promise you that in about 10 minutes time, standing on the bow of the boat, I counted 350 oil rigs. So there is a lot of stuff out there that can grab you. And so we got all of our stuff together, and we sold everything, just like all of us here, or most of us here, have sold everything we own, put it in storage. And in May of 2000, we cast off the lines and became official cruisers. It was an exciting day. Most people have heard of the ICW, the Intercoastal Waterway, which goes from the northern coast of the U.S. down to Florida. But most people have never heard of the Gulf ICW, which starts at the very tip of Texas, goes all the way up and around the Gulf of Mexico, and all the way down to the western coast of Florida. So it's a long ICW. And they have the same kinds of things that are in the regular ICW, the Atlantic coast, but a lot more personal shrimp boats and things like that. So one day going back, we spent a month taking the Gulf ICW to get to Florida. We went through the bayous of Louisiana, the swamps, New Orleans, the locks that go into the Mississippi River. We actually sailed down the Mississippi River. For some reason, that was really exciting to me. And then at nighttime, if we got to a small town, we'd just pull over to the side of the ICW so that the shrimp boats could keep going up and down and avoiding us. And one day we were in one of the locks as we were approaching the Mississippi, and we were tied up right behind the big local shrimp boat. And I'm up on the bow of the boat making sure everything's okay. And this fisherman on the boat yells back at me, "You want some shrimp?" I said, "Sure, but I can't get any money to you." And his southern Louisiana Cajun drawl says, "Honey, I got 10,000 pounds of shrimp on this boat. I think I got you covered." Promptly pitched me a 2-gallon Ziploc bag full of fresh shrimp. It was so good. So I do love the Louisiana folks. The rest of the trip was really spent making improvements on Cloud 9, because even though it's a brand new boat, you gotta add all the toys that you want on it. And as long as my husband told me that it was safety related, then I would say, "Okay, do it." He knew how to wrap me around his finger. So we hung out in Florida for a couple of months and did all those kinds of things. And then the next 6 months just flew by, because we traveled from Florida to the Bahamas, to the Dominican Republic, and over to Puerto Rico, which we absolutely loved. That was one of the first islands that we thought we might be able to live here. It really is a beautiful island. And so about mid-May of that year, all of a sudden we woke up and said, "Oh my God, June 1st is the beginning of the hurricane season. And we can't be in the hurricane zone during hurricane season, or we won't have boat insurance." So June 1st was the beginning of hurricane season. And then we realized the only place we could go to and be out of the hurricane season, out of the hurricane zone, was Trinidad. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the East Coast and all the hurricanes and things that go on over there, we had to be out of there by June 1st, and the hurricane season lasts till November, and now it's almost into December before the hurricanes are over. It goes from Norfolk, Virginia, all the way down to a line between Grenada and Trinidad. Sometimes it slides up. If they haven't had any hurricanes for a while, Grenada will still be out of the hurricane season. If they get hit, even touched by a hurricane, then all of a sudden it's back down into Trinidad. But so if we had gotten into a hurricane and it was where we were, we could have lost our boat. So Trinidad was where we had to go. So all of a sudden we're packing up, loading up, provisioning the boat, getting ready to get out of the hurricanes. We knew that it was going to be a long, adventuresome solo trip for us. So we hustled and prepared for our first solo, our first truly out of the sight of land, long distance sail for a long trip, 7 days. And so, but one thing we did know is that we were sailing from Puerto Rico at 180 degrees south, and if we turned left, if we had a problem, we'd probably run into an island out there somewhere. So sure enough, we made it in 7 days and never saw anything except for diesel belching demons of the dark. Can anybody guess what that would be? A container ship. So we saw them everywhere, but you can see them for a long way away, but it takes them a long time to stop, so we avoided them. Which leads me finally, I'm sure you're saying, to talking about Trinidad and my love of Trinidad, the people, the food, and the country itself. Actually, Trinidad is half of the country of Trinidad and Tobago. But I won't talk about Tobago because I've only been there one time. It's a little bitty island compared to Trinidad. So I'm going to focus on why I like Trinidad and some options for y'all to think about doing on our one-day visit there. Don and I, this is the approach into Trinidad. So you come around the top of the island and then come in down this way. So since I keep talking a lot about Don, I felt like you at least ought to be able to recognize the man. He's the guy in the real dull t-shirt over there. And these are some friends just sitting out having cocktails one night. So Don and I spent, as I said, 3 hurricane seasons in Trinidad in a marina in an area called Chaguaramas. And living on the Odyssey has brought back so many memories of our living on the boat and cruising the different islands, meeting people that we didn't know before, finding out what we had in common, and becoming friends. One of the things that does make me smile is the fact that I lived in Dallas and worked for 40 years. And I met more people in those 8 years that we were cruising that have become very close friends than I ever had in the 40 years of living in Dallas. And I really hope all of us get to make those same kinds of friends, that when we think about this 3 years or however long it may be, that those are the friendships that will carry on from year to year. So Trinidad is and was a safe place to be, as long as you know where not to go. And you'll find out that, where not to go. But it is a fun and safe place to go, to rest up, do chores, we were doing boat chores, explore, and meet other cruisers and locals. The wives shared recipes and exports and shopping trips and that kind of thing, while the guys figured out how to fix every single thing on the boat. But we were a community, just like the Odyssey is. We would get together for cocktail hours, play dominoes, hang out at social gathering places, And that's actually where I learned to play Mexican train. Yay! There were children on many of the boats that were being homeschooled. A lot of the boats had pets as well. And we enjoyed getting to know the children. It brought back sort of a home feeling again of being in the neighborhood. The kids would be given projects to make sure that they had other friends and adults that they could communicate with. They'd get projects that they would come interview us about what we did in our prior life and what we found exciting about one island or the next. The fun thing was, on Halloween, the parents would put their kids in their dinghy. Everybody knows the rubber dinghies. And they'd be in their costumes. And we were all told to turn on our masthead light so that the parents would know which boats were expecting the kids to come around and yell trick or treat. And they did. And it was fun to participate again in a home thing when we were far away from home. We loved participating in the traditions of home, and we would introduce other people. We had big Thanksgiving dinners. I remember one Thanksgiving in Trinidad that some business decided to throw a Thanksgiving dinner for all the cruisers. Have you ever had turkey flavored with curry? It just didn't quite go over, but we ate it anyway. So we had, just like on the Odyssey, we had doctors and lawyers and engineers, chefs, and lots of pilots. It turns out that pilots really love to sail sailboats. And life was really hard for us when we watched all the hurricanes going on up north. Our marina, Cruise Inn, was one of 4 in the local area. Hello. We had a swim-up pool bar. We had a restaurant, a grocery store, a laundry, and even customs. Right in that building, right underneath the lighthouse. Wasn't far to walk to get more ice.
That's a good one.
And every week, Cruise Inn had 2 seamstresses that would come out to the marina with pattern books of different styles of clothes. And they would say, okay, you probably need, for a cover-up, you'll need a yard and a half. And then the next day, all the gals would go racing into town because the fabrics in Trinidad are just beautiful. Every corner has got a huge fabric shop. And so they would say how much material you needed. We would go into town, get our material. They'd come back on Friday, pick up the material, and by the following Friday, they'd bring back our clothes. We got swimsuits. We got cover-ups. When I drug this out, I went, that thing is 20 years old, but it still works. And the men would get shirts and shorts, and we'd even have them make curtains for the boats. So living in Trinidad was not hard work. No matter whether we were out in a anchorage on a little island or in the marina, every morning about 8:30, we'd have our morning net. And that was on the SSB radio. And one of either the cruisers or someone else would start and see who had checked in that night, who needed to go where, if anybody had any problems, and what all was going on in Trinidad that day that we all wanted to go to. The cruisers had a really special guy, and just like on the Odyssey, Trinidad and the cruisers had our own cruise director, and his name was Jesse James. Believe it or not, that's his real name. And 2 or 3 years before our arrival in Trinidad, Jesse and his wife Sharon Rose decided that the cruisers needed help getting around the island. So they started a little company that they called Members Only to provide the cruisers and help them in any way. Jesse's a 3rd generation Indian, and his great-grandfather came over as an indentured servant to Trinidad. So, and if I remember rightly, it was to a British officer, but I really don't remember that. But Jesse, to this day, knows so many people and how to make things happen that the cruisers still today rely on him. Jesse, something smells good. Jesse and his crew of 4 or 5 drivers and vans, just like in Grenada, they call them maxi taxis, took us everywhere, to the grocery stores, to the movies, to the Saturday market, to the shopping mall, doctors, and more importantly, special tours, events, and celebrations. All we had to do was call Jesse. A Canadian cruiser and songwriter even wrote a song and recorded it called Call Jesse. One of my personal fondest memories of Trinidad was when I read in the local newspaper that the biggest bank in all of Trinidad was going to be the gold sponsor for the Trinidad Breast Cancer Race for the Cure. And as a breast cancer survivor, I've done 4 or 5 of these in Dallas. And I said, by golly, I'm going to organize a cruisers team. So I called Jesse. And we went into town and signed up. And that's Jesse and his maxi taxi. And this is my team. The bank was thrilled to have so many women of a different color be in their race. There was about 22 of us and about 300 or 400 Trinidadians, and we had a great time. We got our picture in the paper. We made the TV news that night, and we all got a participation trophy. We were so proud. Now, as long as I'm talking about fondest memories, this one I'm sure would be one of my husband's favorites. And if you're a lover of cerveza, you will be sure and want to get a Venezuelan Polar beer when you're in Trinidad. Now, it's not that the beer is so good, but it is. It's okay. Actually, it's the can that's important. So every year, Venezuela chooses 6 chicas, which are young ladies who are very pretty, besides some other attributes. And then they choose them and put them on the can of beer. Don had a favorite, and her name was Daniela. And when you put the Polar beer into the koozie, right at the lip of the koozie was the most beautiful eyes you have ever seen. And he would talk to Daniela. And like I said, the beer's not too bad, but it gives you something different to look forward to when you go to Trinidad. So, one year, Jesse invited all of the cruisers to his niece's wedding. And obviously, none of us had ever been to a Muslim Indian wedding in Trinidad. So 10 of us climbed into the maxi taxi with our wedding gift of a microwave oven. So we went up the mountain, and the traditions, the symbolisms, the religious significance and the clothes and the amount of food were amazing. The entire community, their little suburb, all came to the wedding. And the priest, I'm not sure, I don't remember what you call a Muslim officiant, but the wedding went on all day long. Different phases, different things, different changing of clothes. And every time he would stop and he would come over to the 2 rows where we were sitting and tell us about why they did it that way and what the significance was, and why the father had to walk around the altar 3 times this way and then 3 times this way, while his daughter was sitting in a chair next to the altar. I don't remember what the significance was, but I remember the plan. So, and then the bride and groom did talk to us and thanked us for coming. Not sure they were as glad that we came, or if we brought the microwave oven, might have been the most important thing. But then again, aren't we having a wedding here on the Odyssey pretty soon? Do you think they're going to need a microwave? I don't know. You never know. One other little story is one Christmas Eve day, I broke a tooth. And it was painful. And I knew I was going to have to suffer 3 or 4 days through the Christmas holiday before I could see a dentist. But we decided to call Jesse. And within 2 hours, Jesse was driving me to the dentist office, who opened up his private dentist office, put a temporary cap on my tooth, and I didn't have to suffer through Christmas. So Jesse James is very efficient. He can do things and still makes things happen. As I started looking forward to returning to Trinidad, I asked myself, what does make Trinidad so appealing to me? And I think it was the food. I really liked Indian curried food. Never been to India yet, but I do like the foods. One of the things you'll learn about Trinidad is that half of their population is of Indian descent. So there's lots of different curry delicacies everywhere. And when we were there in the early 2000s, food trucks were very, very popular. And so every corner had what they called doubles in the morning. It's a dough bread thing that they put breakfast stuff in, and then of course sprinkle some curry. The next favorite thing is a roti. It's R-O-T-I. Some of you, I think, had them yesterday for lunch, and they liked it. You can have it as a mid-afternoon snack, lunch, dinner, all different flavors, shrimps, fishes, beef, vegetarian. They're all good. But my favorite was taking our dinghy over to one of the marinas on Wednesday night for bacon shark. They take a cauldron of oil and they have this bread that they put into a bowl, drop it into the oil, and then it cooks real quick. And then right next to it is a bunch of shark bites, and they mix it in some sort of coating. And then they drop the shrimp bites in another cauldron of oil. And then further on down is all the hot spices, the curry stuff, lettuce and tomato. And that's a bacon shark. I always call it shark and bake. Bacon shark, but they are really, really outstanding. However, I discovered in talking to Jesse last week that there's only one place in Trinidad that you can get bacon shark these days, and that is on the beautiful beach of Maracas Bay. and that is the beach. So those of you who do like to go to the beach, you'll be able to, in the background underneath the trees, there's going to be a guy cooking bacon shark. They also have other things that you can buy. I bought a gorgeous bowl made out of bamboo that was hand painted. So they've got a lot of souvenirs that you may or may not have seen around in the other countries. So Maracas Bay for the beaches and the bacon shark. There are a lot of interesting different places to see and do in Trinidad that it will be hard for you to decide for how to spend the 9 hours that you're going to be there, because it is a drive up to Maracas Bay and it's a drive to some of the other places. I don't know what to tell you about my favorites, but I'm going to tell you a couple of them anyway. One of them is probably the most unusual place that I visited, and it's called Pitch Lake. It's certainly not a chick place to go visit, but the guys seem to really like it for some reason. If you've never been to Yellowstone National Park and seen the hot water that's just bubbling up from the volcanic underneath the ground, think of a giant lake of hot tar.
My.
That's what it is. And it's a big lake.
Tar.
But it's the world's biggest deposit of tar, and it's considered the best in the world. So if you've got a special project that you want to do and you need tar, come to Trinidad. And if you want to go there, you actually can walk in your oldest flip-flops across the cooling tar. I've been there. I've done it. I don't have to do it again. And I don't even remember what happened when I did walk on the warm tar, whether or not I had to throw away the flip-flops. Who knows? Let's see. One other place. For the birders. There is beautiful hummingbirds in Trinidad. Like 150 different species of hummingbirds.
Wow.
There is one place that the husband and wife have put up all of these hummingbird feeders. You get to go there and see the hummingbirds walk through the woods, and then his wife actually cooks a dinner or a lunch for everyone. So if you're into hummingbirds, that's the place to go. Now, during World War II, the U.S. Navy and Coast Guard had a base there in Chaguaramas, and they were there to protect the entire Caribbean. So there is a museum in Chaguaramas that, if you're a real World War II history buff, it's really interesting to go through and see what we as a country were doing to support and take care of the Caribbean nations. The downtown area has got lots of shopping. And here's a picture of the hummingbirds. I almost forgot. The downtown area has got shopping, hopefully, like I said, the fabrics. Another area to go to is called the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven are all beautiful mansions that were built in the early years of the population of Trinidad. Don't know if there's walking tours or not, but I'm sure William will tell us all about it next week if there's any walking tours. But one of the things that I want to stress, and Jesse always told us when we were there, is that certain streets you don't walk down. Certain streets you are okay. So if anytime you get a tour in Trinidad, you'll be with people who are going to take care of you. And just listen to where they tell you not to go. And This is my friend Jesse, as bald as he can be. He's changed a little bit in the last 20 years. But I hope I've encouraged you to try some of the foods of Trinidad, get out and go exploring. There's lots to see and do. And come see me anytime between now and when we get to Trinidad, because there's lots that I can help you with and we can talk about. And if you're interested in any more information, just remember, if you come see me, we can call Jesse. And that's it. Okay. Yes, ma'am. We're going to do it. Is there anybody else who's got a question that I could possibly answer? Yes.
I guess I've asked the same question in Brazil and then but why the crime?
Repeat the question.
The question is, why the crime in Trinidad? I said that there was half of the population is Indian, and the other half is black, and they don't have the same food that they eat or their standards. So about every 3 or 4 years, they elect an Indian president. And then 3 or 4 years later, they don't like what they're going on, and so then the blacks do theirs. The crime that I've heard about and that Jesse mentioned is the same crime problem that we even have in the U.S., and that's gangs. But the gangs are primarily up in the mountains, in the smaller towns, where they can go in and intimidate, scare, and do crimes. But as long as you're with a tour or with people that know Trinidad, I don't have any problem with going out and going exploring. Maracas Bay, the beaches, going downtown. I don't think there'll be a problem. Anybody else? Yes?
Do you know anything about the steel drum band?
Yes, I love pan music. And the problem is, it's right after Carnival. And I couldn't even get a hold of Jesse for 3 weeks because he was involved with taking all the cruisers to every pan event in the world. And even the costume buildings and the pans are not doing anything while they're there. Yeah, I was hoping that we could do something at noon, to find something, but he just said right now there's just nothing going on.
Darn.
Yes. Yes, sir. Scarborough is Tobago, and Port of Spain is Trinidad. Port of Spain is the capital. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
How far a drive to see the pink flamingos?
The pink flamingos. Now the scarlet ibis. Okay. Trying to say, I don't remember seeing pink flamingos in Trinidad. It's not a long drive, but the scarlet ibis nest at nighttime in Trinidad. And then in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning, they wake up and they fly to Venezuela. And then they come back about 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening. So, it's your choice. Maybe when we're leaving, they may be flying home and we might be able to see some. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Can you speak to the Tobago issues? Because we haven't heard a whole lot of good stuff about that one.
She wanted to know about Tobago and stuff going on there. I I don't know if you're aware that our chief purser, Alex, is from Tobago.
Did not know that.
And so he and I have talked, and they've got the same sort of issues. Tobago is the one time I've been there, was quiet little town-ish. There are a couple of nice beaches. At one point in time, they had the windsurfing world championship on one of the bays. So my recommendation would probably be to get a taxi driver or something when you get to Scarborough, and then drive around the island, and that'll probably take 3 or 4 hours, and that's it. But I really have not done any investigation into anything in particular going on in Tobago. Okay. Well, thank y'all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So that was pretty fun. I mean, clearly Diane likes the food. I don't know if there's anything else to do there. I'm teasing. Of course, there's lots to do. The beaches will be wonderful. We can all buy some fabric, make uniforms for the ship. But anyway, so we have a speaker's corner coming up on Friday, April 4th, with Michael Edwards. Introduction to the Odyssey game. This is a game he has been working on for a little while, and he's going to introduce us to it, teach us how to play it, and talk about it's a fundraiser in many ways for the crew fund, the staff fund. So,
Good.
but it sounds like it'll be a fun introduction to it. So that's it. So you now have some time to go play.